Aloha, and welcome back to another special episode of Talk Story with House Majority. My name is Della Belatti, and I serve as the House Majority Leader for the Hawaii State Legislature. A lot has happened since our last episode in June when we completed the end of the 2021 school year and all the wonderful accomplishments of students from across our state doing incredible things despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Since that time, the House and Senate went into special session in July to address Governor David Ige's objections to 3 bills and override 5 of the governor's vetoes. Since that time, the spread of the Delta variant has resulted in new restrictions imposed. We see social gathering restrictions with a minimum of 10 people indoors, no more than 25 people outdoors, and restrictions on patrons in restaurants, bars, and social establishments, such that they must remain seated while maintaining at least 6 feet distancing between groups and have been restricted to 50% capacity. We have also seen the start of the new school year. Over 170,000 public school students have returned to school in the first week of August. There were limited distance learning options available to public school students with a focus on getting students back to in-person and on-campus learning. This special episode will look at all of those developments, but we'd like to first jump in with the lifting of the statewide eviction moratorium and the new process now set in motion with the passage of Act 57, House Bill 1376, to help renters navigate through these troubling times with mediation and rental assistance. Joining me today is Representative Troy Hashimoto of District 8 on Maui, who serves as the Vice Chair of the House Committee on Housing and is one of the lead legislators on the crafting of House Bill 1376. Troy, let's jump right in. There was a bit of confusion on August 5th as the nationwide eviction moratorium was set to expire. So what is the current status between the CDC and the state eviction moratorium?
Well, thanks so much, Majority Leader, for having me. And I think this is a great educational opportunity because there is a lot of confusion out there between Act 57 and the new Center for Disease Control eviction moratorium. And so, as you said, the governor allowed on August 6th the eviction moratorium, the statewide eviction moratorium, which was broad. It applied to everyone statewide since the beginning of the pandemic back in April of 2020 to expire. And that essentially means that we were going to go into what we call Act 57 provisions, which we passed this past legislative session, where you would have to go through mandatory mediation before filing any type of eviction notice with any of your any landlord filing with their tenants and to the courts and to the mediation centers. And so we had quite a good process set out because it was going to address those who are 4+ months rent behind, who would then be able to go to the court process. So there was a lot of time. We wouldn't get to those 1 month and below in rent until January. So there was a lot of time built in to allow people to get back to some type of normalcy. But since that time, just around the state eviction moratorium was about to expire, the Center for Disease Control President Biden announced that there was going to be a CDC moratorium. And we didn't ever have to worry about this before because it never applied to us because we had a very broad statewide eviction moratorium. But now that our statewide moratorium ended, the CDC moratorium does apply to us. So there are criteria that if you make a certain amount of money, that's $99,000 or $1,000 or less as a single filer, or $198,000 as a joint filer, you do qualify for the CDC moratorium. But in this case, you have to be proactive. It doesn't automatically apply to you. You have to go online, find that CDC self-certification filing, fill it out, make sure you qualify, and you send it, if you're a tenant, you have to send it to your landlord. And that will protect you for a certain period of time. Mm-hmm. The current moratorium goes until October 3rd. It could be extended, we're not sure. But it also means that to qualify, we have to be in a high spread environment of COVID-19, and that could end at any time as well. So there is a lot of influx moments that you may have, but I think the best advice is to be proactive and start making sure that you have a plan, because at any time the CDC eviction moratorium will end. But rest assured, there is also Act 57 in place that requires the mediation. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about mediation today and the timing that you can get into mediation, but that is a very powerful tool that you can utilize to find some type of agreement between your landlord and tenant.
So, you talked about Act 57, for our viewers, House Bill 1376 was something that was actually, you've been working on it for a year, like you said. So can you tell me the story a little bit more behind the drafting of House Bill 1376?
Yeah, so when we started the drafting of this bill, it was, we really knew that at some point the eviction moratorium, the statewide eviction moratorium was going to end. And we knew at that point we needed to have some type of transition. We wanted to have some type of soft landing for tenants, because we knew we couldn't just cut off an eviction moratorium and expect everyone in the community would be fine. So we wanted to make sure that we had provisions in place that would allow some time for people to get back to some normalcy. And I think the goal is to get back to normal, but we knew we couldn't do that immediately. And so I think what we decided, Chair Nakamura of the Housing Committee and myself brought together a diverse group of individuals who are experts in that area. I think here in the legislature, we need to hear from various experts to craft a really good piece of legislation. So we had people from legal aid, we had landlord attorneys, we had the judiciary, we had Hawaii Appleseed, we had a retired judge on there. Of course, the Mediation Center of the Pacific was there, all giving their input of what would a soft landing look like. And so I think one of the biggest things that came out of that working group was be sure to keep it simple as possible, because throughout these times, landlord-tenant code is just very confusing. And so we wanted to try and simplify it as best as we can. And so we used the process of the courts having to require mediation anyway. So if you file some type of eviction notice previously to the eviction moratorium, you could go to the courts and they would say, okay, you go through this mandatory mediation that we're going to order you to go through. So our thought was, why wait until you get to the court? Why not do it as a proactive measure, and maybe you can get some type of agreement before seeing a judge. And that's the basis of Act 57, is making sure that that mediation gets done before seeing a judge, going in front of that judge, to make sure that we can help the judiciary in terms of their load, because we know they're going to be overwhelmed, and also to help the mediation centers to take care of a large load as well. We don't want to overwhelm the mediation centers as well. So we tried to make sure that there was some tiering in place to try and make sure that there was a plan of who do we take care of first. And those are the 4+ months behind rent that we want to address first.
So I really wanted to tease out this fact that you brought together key stakeholders, because really, this problem is not just about tenants, but it's also about landlords who have to deal with mortgages. And then it's about the judiciary that has to maintain this. And then it's about the public good and our interest in ensuring that people are safe and have homes, correct? So really, it was a collaborative process. You want to speak anything more to that before we bring over Tracy?
Yeah, no, I think it's a lot of them bring diverse opinions. I think everyone is trying to advocate for their special interest. But I have to give this group a lot of credit, because I think everyone gave up a little bit for what they really wanted in seek of a common good. And that was to make sure this transition period was successful for all. And I think it's a really good symbol of that collaboration in legislation still can happen. And I think it's a model of how we try and collaborate in the future. But I think there was a big sense of urgency that we needed to figure out a solution, because we all knew this day was coming and it's here. And we're just going to hope for the best that a lot of the things that we thought of will be enough to contemplate this transition moving forward.
Sure. Now, I know, did you hit on the main highlights and the key points and features of House Bill 1376, or was there anything else you wanted to add before we bring on Tracy?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuances in the notice that a landlord has to give to a tenant. There is forms available. You have 15 days to notice you're a landlord to a tenant for mediation, and then they have another 15 days to complete the mediation. And so there is a form, handy form on repnakamura.com, and so we were able to work with these stakeholders to put these forms up onto Rep Nakamura's website. So repnakamura.com will have all of those forms for each of the islands. So be sure to check that out.
Before we leave, so each of the islands, that's another complicated piece of this, right?
Right.
So we have House Bill 1376, Act 57 operating on all islands, but we really had, there was a real county component of it. Can you speak to a little bit of that?
Yeah, so each of the counties are operating a little differently because they all have the mediation piece run by the local mediation center. And so we had to work with each county to set that mediation center up. So each mediation center, depending on where you live, will be a little bit different. And so that's why each of the forms are a little bit different, because each of the mediation centers have a different contact information, slightly different procedures, but for the most part, I think they all should be statewide, should have the same type of framework that they're working off of. But we want to make sure that you're getting in touch with the right people and getting those appointments done, because that is the most critical thing, is to start talking now rather than waiting.